All right, we are continuing the factoring of trinomials. So yesterday we did the multiplication of a monomial times a binomial, or monomial times a trinomial. Then we did two binomials where we FOILed. And then we did the special products. And then we did the factoring. So just quick review of like the special products. If I have the same expression, but one's got a plus and one's got a minus, my shortcut is what?
X squared.
So, good. Square the first term, square the second term, and then what goes in between them?
A minus.
Minus, good. Then we did the special products if it was like 2x minus 5, let's say, squared. And for this one, we square the first term, so the square of 2x squared would be 4x squared. We square the second one, so it'd be plus 25. And then we double the product. So because it's negative, it's minus 2 times 2x times 5. So I get negative, this is 10 times 2, 20x. And we also said that if that takes you too long or you don't remember it, then you just fall back upon your foiling. So just expand and FOIL that. You just can't distribute the exponent. I can't do 4x squared plus 25. That is wrong. That does not work. And then we factored, and we said there was, well, two types of factoring yesterday. One was the difference of two squares, which would basically just be the reverse of this guy. Two perfect squares separated by a minus, and we square root the first, and we square root the second. One gets a plus and one gets a minus. And then we factored two different kinds. One, well, not two different kinds, but the same kind, but like sometimes, let's say it's here. Nope. No, it would have to be negative, yeah. Okay, something like this where if the last one's positive, they both have the same sign, right? So last one positive means both plus if the middle term is also plus, and it means both negative if the middle term is negative. So this would be an x plus 2 and an x plus 1. If that was an x squared minus 3x plus 2, then it is, again, both the same sign, but this time both negative. And then we did the combination. If the last term is negative, then one's a positive and one's a negative. And the bigger matches the sign from the middle. So the two terms here would be a positive 2 and a negative 1. So I'd get x plus 2 and x minus 1. And if it was reversed, now the bigger of the two is negative. So it'd be a negative 2 and a positive 1. Questions on any of those? Because again, we're going to build on it today. All right, so we start with what happens if the term on the front is not 1. Jonathan?
You multiply the two on the ends. So that'd be negative 15 times 2, and you factor that.
So this, I'm going to teach you two methods. The first method, we call it trial and error, okay? And the first method literally means I'm going to break this apart into two parentheses. And the first term comes from the product of the first term. So the two things that would multiply together to give me 2x squared would be 2x and x. And then the second term in each would be the terms of negative 15. So factors of negative 15 would be negative 1 and positive 15, positive 1 and negative 15, negative 3, positive 5, positive 3, negative 5. And then one at a time, you put those in there. You multiply the outer and the inner two, add them and see if it matches the middle term. So this is what trial and error is. And sometimes, honestly, I go back and forth between the two methods. If there's not a lot of factors, if the front and the back numbers are both prime, I tend to do this method. But if the last number has a lot of factors, I use second method, okay, which I'll teach you in a second. So for this one, I would start by the negative 1. So I'm going to plug in negative 1 and positive 15. And then I multiply the outer 2 and the inner 2. I'd get 30x minus 1x. And then I want to add those together. That gives me 29x, which is not the middle term. So I don't use those. I go to the next one, and the next one being signs will literally just change my signs. But if I do positive 1 and negative 15, all that does is change these signs. So if the value is wrong, then you don't even have to waste your time doing the switch of the signs because it's also going to be wrong. So then I go to the next set. Which is negative 3 and positive 5. And the outer 2 gives me positive 10x, and the inner 2 gives me negative 3x. And that gives me a 7x, which is also not the middle term. So then I go to the next one, and it would switch my sign, so positive 3, negative 5. This is going to switch my signs, right? So it's still not correct. It would get negative 10 and positive 3, and that's a positive 7. Or sorry, negative 7. Which means I now have to flip these. Or I could flip the 2 and the x. It doesn't matter. But I have to reverse the order. This is when trial and error is not so fun. So now I'm going to say this could also be 15, negative 1, and that's negative 2x, and positive 15x, and that's going to give me a positive 13. Switch those signs, it's just going to give me a negative 13, so I'm going to skip the next one. And then I go to negative 3, positive 5, and that gives me positive 10x, negative 3x. Wait, did I just switch? I just did the same. Sorry, I already did that one. Switching them. Positive 5, negative 3. And that gives me a negative 6x and a positive 5x. So I have negative x. I'm close, but my signs are wrong. So I switch my signs. Negative 5, positive 3. And now I get positive 6x, negative 5x, which is a positive x, and that matches the middle term. As you get better at trial and error, hopefully that doesn't take quite as long, okay? Because you can start to establish things like, I know if I do 15 times 2 and 1 times x, like that's way further apart than just 1. You usually would go to ones that are like, okay, let's get factors that are closer together and then manipulate those. So that's the first process. And again, if their first and the last are easy prime numbers, I tend to pick this one. But the other times I tend to pick option 2. So op 2, we call first and last just as a shortcut, okay? But the process is to multiply the first and the last terms together and then find the factors of that sum to the middle term. Replace the middle term with those two factors and then factor by grouping. So I multiply first times last, 2 times negative 15, and I get negative 30. Sign has to go with it, so be careful. Now I'm looking for the factors of negative 30 that sum to this middle term, which is a positive 1. So factors of 30 that sum to 1, it has to be positive, so it could be negative 1 and positive 30, negative 2 and positive 15, negative 3 and positive 10, negative 5 and positive 6. And those are the ones that work. With me so far? Now that replaces your middle term. So I get 2x squared minus 5. It has to have the x because the x is on the middle. Plus 6x minus 15. The only reason we can do that is because if I add these back together, I get my original question. I can't change the value there. I just rewrite it as a different sum.
Wait, that's the answer?
Nope. Okay, now we factor by grouping. So factoring by grouping is something you do when you have 4 terms. We literally group them in pairs. So I would put the parentheses around the first 2, put the parentheses around the last 2. And then I factor out my greatest common factor. So what can I divide both 2x squared and 5x by? 1x, so I take out an x, good. And then I'd get 2, I'm going to divide this by x, I'm dividing this by x. So I get 2x minus 5. Then I repeat that process for the next one. So what can I divide 6x and 15 by?
Is that a negative 6 or a positive?
It's a positive 6. 3. So I take out a positive 3. This is divided by 3. This is divided by 3. And I get 2x minus 5. And then what's inside the parentheses matches. That's my greatest common factor now. That goes out front. So I'm dividing both of these by 2x minus 5, which means they cancel out. And what's left, x plus 3, gets grouped together in my second set of parentheses. Do you remember? So I would say most people pick first times last unless it's like literally trial and error, super easy. How many of you have never heard of first times last? Because some people actually don't teach it. Okay. Yeah. And factoring by grouping is something you don't remember. So we're going to practice this a couple times. Okay. Factoring by grouping is always when you have 4 terms. Hmm? You don't remember trial and error. Sometimes maybe only pick one, but. Like for me, because 2 and 3 are both prime, I would pick trial and error for the first one. But you get to choose. Okay, so my recommendation is to learn both so you get to choose between them. But obviously you get to choose. All right, so I'm going to do first times last first. I'm going to do trial and error first, and then I'll do first times last. So trial and error here, factors of 2x squared would be 2x and x. And then factors of 3, now keep in mind that they have to be the same sign, and this middle sign is is negative. So that's going to be -1 and -3, or the reverse, -3 and -1. So if I do -1 and -3, and I multiply the outer 2, I get -6x, and the inner 2, -x. That's -7x. Doesn't work. So I switch it. -3, -1, and I get -2x and -3x, and there's my -5x. So that's factored. That time you only had to try 2 things. So again, if the numbers at the front and the end are prime, it's not so bad, especially if they're positive. Then first times last. So I would multiply 2 times 3, and I get 6. And I'm looking for the factors of 6 that sum to -5. They have to be negative, and they both have to be negative because the product has to be positive and the sum has to be negative. So -1, -6, -2, -3, and that's the combo that adds to -5. I replace my middle term with those. So 2x squared minus 2x minus 3x plus 3. So the middle 2, again, take over the middle term.
Does it matter where you put the 2 and the 3?
Nope, they can be switched. Yep, sure. Questions so far? All right, so here's where you got to be really careful. This, obviously, the first 2 get grouped together. That's not bad. But that negative has to stay on the 3x. So when I group them, make sure the negative is stuck on the 3. Don't put the negative in front of the parentheses. God bless you. Now what goes into both 2x squared and 2x? And 2. So I can take out a 2x. This divided by 2x and this divided by 2x. Leaves me with x minus 1. Never 0. Anything divided by itself is 1. What goes into -3x and positive 3? 3. And I'm going to take out, if I take out a positive 3, watch what happens. So if I take out a positive 3, I end up with -x plus 1. Do these match? No. So how can I change it so that they're the opposite?
So they got a negative.
Take out a -3. So if I change this to a -3, now it's positive x. And -1. Now the parentheses match, so the parentheses come out, and what's left gets grouped together. Questions on either method? Yep.
What are we even like trying to find when we do this?
You're trying to figure out what two binomials, when multiplied together, would give you your question. So if I FOIL those back out, I get my question. Eventually, we're doing these so that we can solve for x, but not quite yet. Okay, so go to the next one. I'm going to do first and last this time. What's 2 times negative 27? Negative 54. Then look at your middle term. It's negative, which means the bigger of the two have to be negative, right? So I could do 1 and negative 54, 2 and negative 27, 3, negative 18, 6, negative 9, and that's the winner. That gives me the negative 3. Yep, you got to wait till Isabel comes back. Now I put those in place of your middle term. Positive 6x, negative 9x, minus 27. And then we factor by grouping. What can I take out of 2x squared and 6x? 2x, and I get x plus 3. What can I take out of negative 9x and negative 27? Negative 9. Good, I want to change those signs. And then the x plus 3 gets grouped, or gets taken out, and the 2x minus 9 gets grouped together. I wouldn't want to do trial and error on that, but you can. It would just be the 2x and the x, and then 27, you'd have to try 1 and 27, 2, and then 6, and then 3 and 9. Positive and negative reversing.
If
So
you wanted a test, why would you do trial and error? Because
if, like the first one, I think trial and error is easier. If it's prime. But again, it is your choice. You get to choose. Questions? All right, so how many of you did trial and error on the first one? Okay, and then first times last?
Everyone else.
Really? Because only 3 people raised their hand.
Well, I guess
Okay,
no one
all right.
did it.
Interesting. All right, so if I was to do first times last, 8 times 18 gives you what? 144. And then the factors of 144 that are positive, right? So that they're positive because this middle term is positive. I could do 1 and 144.
348.
I could do 2. It goes to yes. I could do 2 and 72. I could do 3 and 48. And those are the ones that add to 51. So I replace my middle term, 8x squared plus 3x plus 48x plus 18. And then factor by grouping. From those first set of parentheses, I could take out a what? X. And I get 8x plus 3. All right, and then the second set of parentheses. You can take it a 3, but you can go bigger, right? Because look, if I want this to be 3 and I want this to be 8, what is 18 divided by 3? And 48 divided by 8? 6, right? So that helps you figure out what to take out. And then that's 8x plus 3. And then what's inside the parentheses, 8x plus 3. And the next one is x plus 6. Questions on that one? All right, now I've got negative 6 and positive 3, which is? It's negative 6 times positive 3? Negative 18. Now I need 1 to be positive, 1 to be negative. I'm looking at that middle term. I want the bigger to match that sign, so I want the bigger to be positive. So negative 1 and positive 18, and right there, that's the one that works. I'd get negative 6x squared minus, you can put the 1 in front of the x. You don't need to, but you can. Plus 18x plus 3. And then group them. Make sure that you get that negative with the 6x squared. What can I take out of both negative 6x squared and negative x?
Negative x.
Good. I can make it negative x, or you can make it positive and then change the sign in the second one. It doesn't matter. This would be 6x squared. No, 6x, sorry. Plus 1. And then from the second set of parentheses,
3.
good. 6x plus 1. And I get 6x plus 1 times negative x plus 3. If your signs are different, that's okay. So if you took out a positive x, let's say, take out a positive x, I get negative 6x minus 1. and then I would have had to take out a negative 3, and I would get negative 6x minus 1, and then I'd get negative 6x minus 1 times x minus 3. That's totally fine. Both would be correct. And I can check these by multiplying out my answer and seeing if it matches the question. Mars.
What about trial and error for this one?
So I would do
Quite bad.
negative 6x squared plus 17x plus 3. So trial and error on this one, that first term has to multiply to give you a negative 6x. So I'd have to do negative 1 and positive 6, positive 1 and negative 6, positive 2 or negative 2 and positive 3, and negative and positive 2 and negative 3. You'd have to try all 4 of those combinations in the beginning, and then 3, 1 and 3, or 3 and 1. So I can do negative x and then 6x, and then positive 1, positive 3, that's negative 3x, positive 6x, which doesn't work. Then I can switch the 3 and the 1, plus 3 plus 1, and I get negative x plus 18x, and that's positive 17x. So there's your trial and error. If it didn't work, I would have to then go through 1 and negative 6, negative 2 and 3, and 2 and negative 3. So there's 4 different combinations there. Sometimes you just get lucky, though, and it's less work.
But on your first one, negative 6x and negative 1 and x and negative 3. Or are they all negative? Because my answer, I got negative 6x plus 1 and then x plus 3.
No, it should be negative x plus 3. If it's that one, it should be. It's one or the other. Like, all the signs have to swap. So it's either 6x plus 1 and then negative x plus 3, or it's negative 6x minus 1 and x minus 3. They all have to swap. Okay, last slide, and then we'll save the last one for tomorrow. All right, so the first one, we'll do first and last. 6 times 10 would be 60. Factors of 60 that sum to 19, all positive. Good. 1 and 60. 2 and 30. Wait, 230.
No.
Oh, you're just giving them to me. 3, 20. 4, 15. That's the one that works. 6x squared plus 4x plus 15x plus 10. Factor by grouping. What can I take out of both 6x squared and 4x?
2x.
Good. And 15x and 10.
5.
Good. And then 3x plus 2 and 2x plus 5. And the last one, 3 times negative 8, negative 24. Factors of negative 24 that sum to negative 2, so bigger has to be negative. 1, negative 24. 2, negative 12. 3, negative 8. 4, negative 6, and that's the one that works. 3x squared plus 4x minus 6x minus 8. Factor by grouping. Make sure you keep the negative on the 6. Take out the x. Take out a negative 2. And it's 3x plus 4 and x minus 2. If you switch, like if I switch the order here and I made it negative 6 and positive 4, you'd still end up with the same answer, just the switched order. It would be x minus 2 and 3x plus 4, which is still correct. Order is not important for multiplication, as long as in the same parentheses is the 3x and the 4, and in the same parentheses is x minus 2. Those could be totally switched. Questions? I don't remember if the variables are different. Just be aware and make sure you pay attention so you don't get frustrated if you're getting them wrong, okay? But the big ideas, again, is due tomorrow.
So what happens if you have a number that you can like get the numbers to multiply to but not to add?
So good question. If I had exhausted all of these and none of them match, so let's say this was negative, I don't even know if this is going to work. Yeah, let's say this is negative 3 in the middle. And I went through all of the options, which I basically did, right? 1 all the way up to negative 24. And none of them add up, then we just say prime.
Yeah.
It's not factorable. So it's not that it's no solution because we're not solving these. There are no solutions. It's just that it's not factorable, so we'd say prime. Mars.
The last terms in parentheses, like for the last one is -2 and 4. They always add up to the last one.
These two have to multiply to give you this number, and these two have to multiply together to give you this. So first in each has to multiply together to give you the first term. So first and first. Second in each has to multiply together to give you the last term. And then the sum of the outer and inner have to equal the middle term. That's how you test it, trial and error. We good? Questions? This is most people's least favorite, so tonight might not be so pleasant, but at least you get the hang of it. Yeah, it's not awful. Of the fact